We're counting down the 10 toughest sailboats ever built. Vessels engineered not for speed, but for survival when the ocean turns lethal. From steel-plated buses that can be welded back together in the middle of the Southern Ocean, to unyielding fiberglass hulls with thickness you could measure in inches, these are the boats that treat hurricane-force storms like a nuisance, not a threat. You will see designs with watertight bulkheads borrowed from submarines, and classic hulls so overbuilt they have shrugged off disasters that folded modern racers. So which vessel sets the ultimate benchmark for structural integrity at sea? Let's find out, starting with number 10. Steel doesn't care about fashion, and the Challenge 72 proves it. Built for the BT Global Challenge, an around-the-world race that runs against the wind and current, this 71-foot brute is less yacht, more armored personnel carrier. Each hull is plated with 8 to 10 millimeters of high-tensile steel, welded solid from bow to stern. When the Southern Ocean throws 40-foot waves and floating debris, the Challenge 72 doesn't flinch. Logs from the 1996 to 1997 race show these boats shrugging off collisions that would have shattered lighter hulls. One boat took a glancing blow from a whale, tearing open a gash in the bow. The crew limped into Ushuaia, Argentina, and local welders patched the plate in a day. No special tools, no custom parts, just a torch and a steady hand. That is the real advantage. If you can find a welder and a hunk of steel, you can fix this boat anywhere on Earth. It is heavy, it is not fast, and yes, you'll fight rust. But when the ocean tries to break you, the Challenge 72 just gets a new scar and keeps going. Raw aluminum does not rust, and the KM Bestevaer wears its scars like a badge of honor. No paint, no fairing, just thick 5 to 6 millimeter alloy plates welded into a hull that shrugs off Arctic ice. Every dent tells a story. Each one is easy to find and easier to inspect. There is no hiding corrosion under layers of gloss. The pilot house sits forward, armored in structural glass that is rated to take green water head-on. When the wind howls and the decks glaze with freezing spray, the Bestevaer's windows hold firm, turning the cockpit into a safe command post. This is a boat built for patrol, not parade. Maintenance means a Scotch-Brite pad, not a shipyard haul-out. Lighter than steel, but just as tough where it counts, the Bestevaer trades brute weight for agility without giving up impact resistance. For high-latitude explorers, it is the difference between worrying about rust and watching the horizon. If you want a boat that disappears into the Arctic and comes back with nothing but stories, this is it. Aluminum doesn't crack under pressure, it dents. The Garcia Exploration 45 was built for sailors who see icebergs as potholes, not hazards. At the waterline, the hull plating runs 10 to 12 millimeters thick. Owners in the Arctic have logged direct hits with growlers, leaving a bruise on the hull but never a breach. When the inevitable dent appears, the fix is simple. Anchor on a gravel beach, swing the centerboard up, and go to work with a sledgehammer. No fiberglass splinters, no hidden delamination. Just a visible mark and a story to tell. This is the only production cruiser where grounding is part of the maintenance plan. The centerboard lifts fully into the hull, letting you beach the boat on stones or sand, inspect the bottom, and make repairs without a shipyard. In the logs, you will find photos of hammer marks and Arctic gravel still stuck to the paint. That is versatility you cannot buy in a composite hull. When the rest of the fleet is patching cracks, the Garcia crew is pounding out dents and sailing on. Some boats hide their strength under layers of marketing gloss. The Hallberg-Rassy 42F wears its engineering on its sleeve. Walk the deck, and you will find no seam where hull meets deck. Instead, there is a continuous laminate. Yard workers lay glass cloth right over the joint, saturate it with resin, and let it cure as one piece. No bolts to loosen, no seam to flex, no chance for a leak to start. When a North Sea gale slams green water across the deck, that monocoque bond does not budge. Owner logs from Force 11 storms tell the same story. The cabin stays dry, the boat stays quiet, and the hull moves as a single, unyielding shell. Then there is the hard dodger, tempered glass, not canvas, bolted into a structural hoop. It has been tested to withstand loads over 3 tons, the kind of impact that would rip a spray hood clean off a lighter boat. When a wave breaks over the bow, it hits the dodger with a dull, heavy thud. The crew behind it barely feels a shudder. Rain, sleet, or flying spray, the cockpit is a vault. This is not just about thick layup or heavy displacement, it is about eliminating every point of weakness, every place the sea might find a way in. The Hallberg-Rassy 42F does not just survive a pounding, it ignores it. And while it cannot be sealed off in watertight compartments like a submarine, it is as close as fiberglass construction gets to stormproof. Flooding on most boats is a death sentence. On the Amel Super Maramu, it is just another checklist item. This French cruiser takes compartmentalization to a level most production yachts never consider. 8 watertight compartments run bow to stern, each one isolated by bulkheads and sealed with heavy doors. These are not just plywood panels, they are proper dogged doors with rope and cleat locking mechanisms that clamp shut and stay shut. If a through hull fails or a rock punches a hole in the bow, you close the nearest door, spin the valves, and the rest of the boat stays dry. Water cannot move from one compartment to the next. The manual spells it out: in a flooding emergency, shut the door and isolate the damage. The engine room sits under the cockpit floor, walled off from the living quarters. Access comes from above, not through the main cabin, so if the engine space fills with water or smoke, the rest of the boat remains untouched. Bilge pumps are split between compartments, each with its own pickup and manual override. Limber pipes route water to a central sump, but every hose can be valved off in seconds. There are no stories of Super Maramus lost to a single hull breach. Owners call it overkill. Engineers call it common sense. When you want a boat that shrugs off disaster and keeps you afloat, even when half the hull is compromised, this is the system you want. It is not the lightest solution, but when the ocean tries to punch through, the Amel just seals the door and carries on. Steering failure is the silent killer offshore. That is why the Pacific Seacraft 37 is built with a skeg-hung rudder that does not just hang in the water, it is armored. At the base sits a bronze shoe 2 inches thick, bolted directly to the skeg. If you hit a log or a floating crate at hull speed, the impact does not shear off your steering. The bronze shoe takes the blow, spreads the force, and keeps the rudder in line. It is the difference between limping home and calling for rescue. The rudder stock itself is a solid one and a 1/4-inch stainless steel shaft, overbuilt for any scenario short of a direct hit from a shipping container. There are documented cases where Pacific Seacraft 37 boats struck debris hard enough to gouge the bronze, yet the rudder kept turning and the boat kept sailing. Bill Krelock, the designer, never trusted spade rudders. He wanted a load-bearing skeg that could take a pounding without flexing or snapping. The Coast Guard has used variants of this setup for training vessels, trusting the design to survive repeated groundings and hard knocks. Modern production boats with exposed spade rudders might shave off a knot or two in light air. But when you are surfing down the face of a breaking wave, you want a rudder that is built like a railroad tie. That is the Pacific Seacraft 37, a tank in a tuxedo, engineered for the kind of punishment the sea delivers when nobody is watching. The Contessa 32 does not look like a heavyweight. At just 32 feet, it is smaller than most ocean-going cruisers. But in August 1979, when the Fastnet race turned deadly, this little boat wrote its name into sailing history. That year, a Force 10 storm slammed into the fleet with hurricane winds and 50-foot breaking waves. Over 300 yachts started the race, and more than a quarter were knocked down or capsized. 5 sank. Rescue helicopters worked through the night, pulling sailors from life rafts in the Celtic Sea. Only one boat in the small boat class finished, the Contessa 32 Ascent. Ascent did not escape the storm unscathed. She recorded multiple knockdowns, rolled flat by breaking seas, her mast nearly in the water. But each time, the Contessa 32 fought her way upright. The secret is her angle of vanishing stability, 156 degrees. That is a number most modern production boats cannot touch. It means you can flip her almost completely upside down, and she will claw her way back, ballast and hull shape doing the work. Naval architects call this self-righting. In real life, it is the difference between a rescue and a finish line. The Fastnet inquiry changed the way offshore boats were measured. Lighter, faster designs lost their appeal. Survivors wanted stability curves, not speed records. The Contessa 32 proved that when the sea gets angry, small and tough beats big and fragile. She is not a cargo hauler, she is not a floating condo. But if you want a boat that refuses to stay down, this is the one that set the standard. Some boats are built to keep moving no matter what the sea throws at them. The Island Packet 38 is one of those. Its hull and keel are a single, continuous piece of fiberglass. A monocoque design that means no seam, no bolts, and no weak spots for salt water to find. The lead ballast is not bolted on. It is glassed in deep, sealed for life. Run this boat up on a reef and you will not shear off a keel or rip open a joint. You will just scrape off some gel coat, back off, and keep going. When a wave slams the bow, the whole structure absorbs the shock as one solid mass. There is no echo, no hollow rattle, just a muted, heavy thud that tells you the boat is taking the hit, not you. That is the difference you feel when you are offshore, 1,000 miles from help. Modern production boats might flex and groan. The Island Packet just shrugs. Steering is the other silent killer on passage, and here the Island Packet 38 goes old school. Instead of cables or hydraulics, it uses a rack and pinion system, like the steering on a tractor or a heavy truck. No pulleys to jam, no wires to snap. It is direct, heavy, and famously reliable. Owners have crossed oceans with the original gear untouched, even after decades of hard use. In heavy weather, when autopilots fail and hands go numb, the wheel still turns and the rudder still answers. It is not the fastest boat around, and nobody calls it pretty. But when you want a cruiser that takes punishment without complaint and keeps you in control after the 5th knockdown, the Island Packet 38 stands tall. Integrated strength, no nonsense, and a steering system you can trust with your life. That is why it sits this high on the list. When a Hans Christian 33 or 38 slams into a wave, it does not flinch. It absorbs the blow with the weight of a freight train. This is a boat that feels like it was carved from a single block of teak and glass, every inch of it built to outlast the sea. The displacement tells the story, nearly 28,000 pounds, tipping the scales heavier than 2 modern 40-footers combined. That is not marketing bravado. It is measurable, and you feel it in every motion. Where most production cruisers chase lightness and speed, the Hans Christian is unapologetically massive, but it is the keel that sets it apart. Instead of hanging a lead fin on bolts, the ballast is sealed deep within the hull, fully encapsulated in fiberglass. No keel bolts to shear, no rust to creep in and eat away your safety margin. Run this boat aground and you will not find a trail of leaking bolts or torn fiberglass. You will scrape the paint, maybe dent your pride, but the structure remains untouched. Owner logs are full of stories. Boats are refloated after hard groundings, hulls unscathed, crews shaken but never stranded. Momentum becomes your shield. When a Hans Christian is caught in a beam sea, it does not bounce or shudder. It rides through, the hull acting like a shock absorber. There is a reason these boats cross oceans decade after decade. The sea can pound, but it cannot break what it cannot reach. Encapsulated ballast, full-length keel, and a hull that feels more like a safe than a shell. If you want a floating fortress, this is the Teak Vault. Only one fiberglass boat on this list is heavier built, but none are more forgiving when the bottom comes up to meet you. Every sailor who has ever been caught out in a real blow dreams of a boat that just shrugs. The Westsail 32 is that boat. Forget about racing lines or glossy brochures. This is a survival machine, built for one purpose, to keep floating when the sea turns mean. The hull is solid fiberglass, hand-laid in layers so thick that in places it measures close to 2 inches. That is not marketing, it is a wall of resin and glass, built back when builders did not count ounces. They counted on coming home. The displacement hits 19,500 pounds, with 7,000 of that in encapsulated ballast. There are no keel bolts to shear and no water to find its way into the lead. When you run aground, you do not check for cracks, you check your pride. The legend of the Westsail. 32 is not just numbers on a spec sheet. In 1991, the Westsail 32 Satori was abandoned off the New England coast during the Halloween nor'easter, the storm that inspired the perfect storm. The Coast Guard pulled the crew off by helicopter in 80-knot winds and left the boat for lost. Days later, Satori was found still afloat, upright, and ready to sail home. That is the difference a real hull makes. When the crew has to leave, the boat refuses. Take a sledgehammer to the hull, owners have. You will get a sore arm before you see daylight. When a wave slams the bow, the sound is not a slap or a rattle. It is a deep, dull thump, like a vault door closing. That is the thump test. On a modern production boat, you would hear the flex and maybe even feel the hull shudder. On a Westsail, you just hear mass. Beneteaus and their kin might gain a knot or two in flat water, but when the ocean gets ugly, they fold. The Westsail just plows on, slow and steady, immune to panic. It is not the fastest, it is not the prettiest. But when you want to bet your life on a hull, this is the tank you want under you. You cannot kill it with a hammer. You cannot kill it with a wave. That is why it sits at the top of the list. Across all these overbuilt hulls, one truth emerges. Real safety at sea isn't about gadgets or speed, but raw, uncompromising structure. When the ocean tests a boat, only engineering stands between adventure and disaster. The pattern is clear. Survival favors the stubbornly built. In a world chasing lighter, faster, flashier, these tanks are proof that strength still matters most. Which would you trust when everything's on the line?